this is the game that kicked it all off, prime time on a Saturday night, Atlanta United and the New York Red Bulls, who just seem to have Atlanta United's number.
Oh, what a ball this is for Kaku and Florian Valot. What an incredible story when you think back to double ACL tears and the disappointment when we're talking about control the controllables and the mental health of players. This is something that's so huge. And by the way, if you're Georgie Bello, you have to have a little bit more responsibility, because watch the way Mesa turns and just gives the young man the earful. Like, you've got to pinch inside. You've got to track, especially if Escobar is going to be that high up. Now, take nothing away from that ball from Kaku and that finish. Now, Georgie Bello, he's got that opportunity to level, and he smashes the crossbar, gets inside, and
makes up for
just
it.
inches over the right shoulder of the goalkeeper. But, you know, you fast forward, combination, Barlow, Caceres comes in, and look at the polar bear. Look at the big old polar bear, Brad Guzan. Goes to ground. He's at the mercy of the attacking player in Caceres. Maybe he could have lifted. Maybe he could have scooped. But Guzan with a huge save. The transition, and more transition. But, hey, by the way, Alan Chapman, he can take a hit. Look at this. He gets roughed and tumbled, does the flip, pops up, and he's laughing. And then finally, last opportunities, dying moments, and you're looking for hope. You're looking for a chance. You're looking to give yourself just that half opportunity in those dying seconds. And finally, 97th minute, what a save. Jensen, it could have been 1-1. Literally 7 seconds left, and Jensen comes up with a huge fingertip save, pushes it up and over the right-hand side of that crossbar. And Chris Armas and company, this is a huge start, because these points do count towards the regular season.
The Columbus Crew giving us life. We had seen some anemic first halves, which is to be expected, but not from Columbus. Our first goal of the first half in the MLS's back tournament.
Yeah, and I think this is the best goal so far. Lucas Zelarayán, he absolutely pings this ball. It's the technique, it's the power, it's the accuracy, it's the pace of the ball. Absolutely nothing the goalkeeper can do about it. Full stretch, but he kisses the inside of that post. And what a fantastic goal. Go ahead, search, celebrate. Great start for Columbus Crew.
Then in the 30th minute, you know this guy, Gyasi Zardes.
You know, there's a conversation that I want to have with you about the way Caleb Porter is setting his team up, because Gyasi Zardes has been incredible in this format, but he pushes wide, Diaz pushes wide, and Zelarayán kind of steps inside. Look at this ball. Now, we're talking about the technical ability of some of the most dangerous players on the Columbus Crew, but can we also point out how lackadaisical and naive this defending is from FC Cincinnati? It started at the opening whistle. There's no recognition. Players are getting turned. There's no touch tight. There's no conversation. There's no protecting the back shoulders. This was a horrific defensive approach for Jaap Stam, and he's got to be incredibly disappointed with what he saw. But take nothing away from Gyasi Zardes. That is another fantastic goal. By the way, Zardes, 35 goals, 64 games for Columbus Crew.
Really incredible what Gyasi Zardes, and we're going to get to him in a moment, has been able to do. It took him 112 games with the LA Galaxy. Obviously, we saw him play as a defender there as well. But here's the good news. Group E is complete. So we have kind of the way that this one is shaking out. And I think probably we expected to see the Columbus up there. I did anyway. But I was really thinking that Atlanta New York Red Bulls at the minimum would draw in this one. So the next game coming up for Atlanta United is this Thursday against, thankfully, I think Frank de Boer and company is very happy to be facing Cincinnati before you face Columbus. And I thought that before we saw last night. Now, I don't think there's probably a team in the bubble feeling better than the way that the Crew are. Now, when you think about the World Cup, Dunny, you think, oh, you can't lose that first game. Is Atlanta United in a position now to not advance? Or do you think having the experience, having the roster that they have, that it's not time to hit the panic button? Like, you know, fans on Twitter are always hitting the panic button.
Yeah. I don't think either of those things are an issue for me. I think we're going to see Dutch on Dutch crime, because what Frank de Boer and Atlanta United are going to do to FC Cincinnati, I just don't. There's nothing to, and I'm trying to be so nice right now. I'm trying to carefully find my words. This was nothing short of a debacle last night for FC Cincinnati, top to bottom. Offensively, nothing. And I know Locadia being injured is a huge loss, but when you look at defensive transition, when you look at static defending, when you look at a back four in front of a goalkeeper, when you look at Harris Medunian getting dragged all over the place, youthful exuberance with Frankie Amaya, there's De Jong had nothing. He had nothing going forward. This team was, and I understand Yap Stam. It's only a few weeks with the team. He's still trying to understand who he can trust and who he couldn't trust. I said after 4-0, Jillian, he's going to learn more about his team after 4-0 than he would have probably learned in any other part of that match, because you figure out who's quitting on you. You're figuring out who's throwing their head in disgust, who's waving their arms around. You're figuring out guys that you can trust. And I think he had a moment of truth last night over the course of those 90 minutes after being systematically and continuously taken apart from Columbus. For Atlanta, I feel like half the roster is different. And the focus is always going to be on Josef Martinez. And we'll talk about Josef Martinez's role or potentially who should try to fill that role, and if it looks drastically different or if it looks similar. But I would also say there's so many different ways that Frank de Boer can set up his defense. Now, 3 in the back versus a flat 4 could always be a conversation, but with Georgie Bello on one side and Brooks Lennon on the other, everything going forward, you're going to get so much athleticism in the attack and so much general awareness and so much intelligence. But I think you're also going to be hung out to dry every once in a while. And I think we saw that on the Velo goal, is where your outside attacking players that still have defensive responsibilities get going forward. Well, that means your back 3 has to watch their spacing. That also means that your midfielders, your quote-unquote defensive midfielders, have to have better general awareness. So it could have been 1-1. It could have been 2-1. It ended 1-0 in favor of the New York Red Bulls. I'm not concerned at all, because I think, as we saw last year, everyone who tries to ride off of Frank de Boer's side, you see that slow simmer, and that slow simmer turns into not only defensively stout kind of setups looking for the shutouts, but then offensively, it's a team that just generates chance after chance after chance. So I'm not selling for Atlanta United.
And I think that that's a really good point, that they created the chances last night. When you looked at the stats, you would have thought Atlanta United would have done better in that game. They outshot them. Possession was 70-30. So they don't have the issue in creating chances, but you look at those 2 chances by George Bello in the first half, by Adam John in the second half, and you can't help but think to yourself, well, those are chances that Josef Martinez would have likely finished. So they have to figure out what's going on at the striker position. Barco told reporters earlier this week that Pitti, Castro, and himself, they've all been training as strikers. So maybe we see Barco and Pitti float in at that false 9. We saw Joseto and later Adam Johns come in at that number 9 spot. But I think that is going to be what Atlanta United has to figure out, because they've always been able to get by. Maybe there's a lapse on the left-hand side. Maybe there's a lapse. Maybe Brad lets one in, even though he was tied last year with 14 clean sheets with Bill Hamid.
Yeah.
Brad kept them in that game. Arguably him and Pitti probably man of the match on that end. But they have to figure out the striker position. I think that's something Frank de Boer now has until Thursday to figure out.
Yeah, and to your point, I think there's a blessing. Obviously, the curse is losing Josef Martinez, right? The blessing is during this break, you've given him a significant amount of time to step up his rehab and hopefully be back and still have a significant portion of the season to play a huge part in. That being said, heading into the season, I thought the biggest question was going to kind of be on that left-hand side. We saw what Georgie Bello, as an outside left back, an attacking wide left player, could bring to the table. But we also understood he's a young man. We also understood physically, emotionally, he was going to kind of grow into the position. And there needed to be accountability, but there also needed to kind of be baby gloves on him. And I think then when you lose Gonzalez Perez, you bring in Mesa, it's kind of like for like, but yet still you're going to look for an adaptation period, because yes, Liga MX is Liga MX, but playing in MLS and playing with new players around you and playing in maybe a different format, as well as a coach that has a different philosophy, is a big talking point. I think the curse for Frank de Boer is ultimately he's got so many pieces. It was almost the same curse he had last year when you're trying to figure out, okay, what's Pitti's role? What's Barco's role? And we know Josef is going to just go out and Josef. But then kind of with a Darlington Nagbe, is he in between? Do you start the granddad Jeff Lorenowitz, or do you bring him off the bench? What about Eric Remedi, Emerson Heineman? So you have so many options. I think this club has done such a great job of giving Frank de Boer so many different options to play with, but in that blessing is also a curse, because you got to figure out a way to tactically set your team up to make sure defensively, as we saw Frank de Boer, and you referenced all the shutouts for the polar bear Brad Guzan, you also have to figure out offensively how you want to play. And Atlanta has always been so good and so surgical in terms of their transition. But I think now they've had to switch a little bit, because when you're talking about Miggy and Joseph, that's just go, go, go. When you're talking about Pete and Barco and Joseph, that was more, hey, we have more possession. Let's be a little bit more methodical. Let's be a little bit thoughtful about how we're going to pull teams apart. So, yeah, again, I'm not worried. I'm not, and I think we'll see all those chances on display against Cincinnati, because Yapstam's got some big issues to deal with, especially in that back four in front of the goalkeeper.
Will be interesting to see what they do. Florian Valot was the difference, as we said, our Heineken man of the match. Coming back, you love to see a guy like that after back-to-back ACL tears. The hard work pays off. You love to see it when you play for a guy, especially like Chris Armas, who spoke about post-game. When you think Red Bulls, they're going to run you tired. They're going to run you exhausted. You're in Orlando. They're going to come at you with the high press. And Chris Armas is pumped about this 5 subs.
The substitutions early on with the midfielders, we bring on fresh legs and Alex Mule, and so much with us, our style of play requires players to meet the demands with the intensity and the running and understanding against the ball. So the first few substitutions had that in mind, with some intensity and energy, because it's difficult. It's hot. You can see the water breaks. It's humid. So it was a little bit of both. And always, as a coach, you have to look at the game and manage it the best way you can. But we knew we would be aggressive with our substitutions, and I thought that the guys did really well to come on.
Full example there, by the way, with the double mask. Love to see it. This is a guy that players love to play for. He really comes across as a player's coach, and he mentions the 5 subs. Dunny, how helpful is that for a team that plays in this New York Red Bull style?
Game changer. Absolutely game changer. Because what the 5 subs rule will do, at first it'll afford you to correct mistakes. Any tactical mistakes, any type of player mistakes that you had made going into a match, you can very easily rectify with utilizing an early sub. That was not the case earlier. On top of that, you're looking at a team whose philosophy is built on youthful exuberance, the identity of the New York Red Bulls, and how you want to play. So him having 5 changes, it could. This is what I keep saying. Up until the 70th minute, you could feel completely in control of a match, or you could feel like, man, we've had nothing in this game, and you turn to your bench and you can have impact subs both offensively and defensively. So it's a game changer for every head coach. But I will tell you, Jillian, this is going to sting for those teams that don't have depth. And the easiest telling point is when managers that are chasing games don't utilize all their substitutions, because that means they trust the players on the field who are fatigued as opposed to the fresh players they have on the bench.
Will be interesting to watch. You say game changer. There's one guy that I know Columbus fans are very happy to have, and that is their brand new game changer. He's coming in as advertised, and that is Zelarayán. And what we saw from him last night, 2 goals in his first 3 games. Last night, he had the goal to get it all going and finishes with an assist. What'd you see from him?
Everything that I saw down at Tigres underneath Tuca Ferretti. If you've watched any of CONCACAF Champions League, if you've watched any of Liga MX, I know he was kind of pushed a little bit on the outside where it was less of a starter and more of an impact sub, but he is flying high. This is everything that Columbus needed. They had all the other pieces, and you can plug and play a lot, but when you have a player of this caliber and you've spent this type of money and you get this type of performance, I think it speaks volumes. And everyone that I've talked to involved with the Columbus crew says inside the locker room, his personality fits perfect within the pocket of the group of players. So whether it's in the run play, whether it's set pieces, as we saw, exquisite goal for me, goal of the tournament so far, or it's having the ability with Gyasi to kind of flare to one side, Diaz flares the other, and him kind of push up in a false 9, Harris Medunjanin has arguably been amongst the quote-unquote steadiest elite type of midfielders. If you ask any of the Philadelphia Union fans, he got run into the ground by Zelarayán, and he got caught ball watching, and these little feints and the dips off the shoulder. I think we're just seeing glimpses of what Zelarayán is capable of, and I think we'll be talking about him all season long as kind of one of the elite number 10s in Major League Soccer.
You know, Caleb Porter is very happy to have him in Columbus this year. And also, Gyasi Zardes, who has had a resurgence since he arrived in Columbus in 2018. You know, Dunny, you're the one who made the point that he had 35 goals now in his 64 games with Columbus. It took him 131 games to do with the LA Galaxy, 121, I believe. But either way, you know, it's just, this is the team for him. Why is you know, when you think Gyasi, think U.S. men's national team, flashy, the hair. The LA Galaxy at first was like the team. And then he comes to Columbus, and you're unsure of how that's going to work out for a guy like Gyasi Zardes. But it seems to be the perfect fit. Why?
Well, because he's a real 9. He's consistent with his performances, and I know he's always going to have knocks. It's the same knock that people made about Kyle Beckerman and his involvement with the national team. It's basically people looking down on Major League Soccer. And when you're talking about consistent goal scorers, you have to talk about Gyasi Zardes over the last. And by the way, it's amazing what happens when you don't play him at right back and you actually play him as a striker, how his numbers go through the roof.
He scores 35 goals in 64 games.
Yeah. I think one of the difficulties for Gyasi, and this is what I've seen when he came in the league, when he comes out of Cal State Bakersfield, he signs with the Galaxy, he's with Robbie Keane, he's with Landon Donovan, so he's kind of the third part of this trifecta. He's picking up a lot of his goals, getting on the end of things because of the quality of service. When you go to Columbus at the time, it was the talk of, okay, is Greg Berhalter the number 9 whisperer? Look at how many, look at both Kamaras, and could Gyasi be the third? Well, yeah, absolutely. But it's also this narrative of like, oh, how's he going to settle in Ohio? Columbus is fantastic, great city. The club is a fantastic club. So, yeah, I was never concerned about this. What I was concerned is the quality of the service, because when you lost Higuaín, you kind of had a hole, and you had kind of number 10s by committee. But I think that's one of the reasons why the Columbus Crew ownership and the hierarchy went out and spent significant sums of money on Zelarayán, because you have a goal scorer, a clean goal scorer. Now, Josie, on the national team, whether he played wide right or he played wide left or he played point striker, there was always kind of this narrative of question of what's his best position. Well, he's an attacking player. And whether he flares in the right channel or the left channel, that doesn't matter. If he's cleaning balls up inside the 6, or he's hitting bangers right foot or left foot, he's a goal scorer. So I think this season you're going to see Gyasi in double digits, and easily, I would say, above 15, pushing 20, because he now has the service. Whether you're talking about Mokhtar on one side, you're talking about Diaz on the other side, you're talking about Zelarayán underneath, there's no reason Gyasi shouldn't hit 20 goals this season. And
not to mention they got Darlington Nagbe supporting now what's a killer attack in the midfield. I am excited for this Columbus Crew side. All right, guys, let's talk a little bit of fun. MLS Predict 6, presented by BetMGM. It is back. A free-to-play game by Major League Soccer. Correctly predict the outcomes of the 6 featured matches along with secondary predictions, and you can win $50,000. That's sounding pretty good right about now, right, Dunny? Head over to MLSPredict6.com and play for free. Round 1 is locked, but round 2 is opening up Sunday at noon. That's in 30 minutes.
Service in, good ball, Demir! Gregush putting the shot on. Service again, and Kai Kamara. That's what Kai Kamara does. Amaria looking for Amaria. He's there on the back post, and it's in. Finley to Amaria. Headed on and in. Price. Leaves it for Kindo, what a goal! Now Kevin Molino! Gerso, what a turn by Gerso. Can they put a bow on this? It's Hurtado!
One of the toughest groups in this tournament, Group D. They are at it tonight. Sporting Kansas City taking on Minnesota, 8 o'clock on ESPN, followed by Real Salt Lake, Dunny's team, taking on the Colorado Rapids. When you look at this group, you have to remember that there are 3 teams in the Western Conference that started off the season with 6 points, and it is Sporting Kansas City, Minnesota, and RSL. But you can't overlook Colorado.
Yeah.
Did I have that right? Yes, you can't overlook Colorado. But let's talk a little bit about Minnesota. They're taking on what is Iko Para's former team in Sporting Kansas City. But Iko Para regrettably had to skip this tournament, sitting out with an injury. Reigning Defender of the Year. Dunny, how do you replace a guy like Ike, who's also such a leader with any team he's a part of?
Yeah, you don't. You can't. There's no like-for-like replacement for Iko Para at this stage of his career. Now, Jose Aja would probably be the natural player to slide in to that center back position. But Ike's been nothing short of incredible. And what I think when you talk about consistent center backs in the league, you have to talk about Iko Para over the last 6-7 seasons. And a lot of that was due to the success of Sporting Kansas City, both domestically and internationally. But there comes that point where players kind of look around and they say, hold on a second, why is this guy making that much money? And that's way more than I make. We need to level the playing field. The best thing that happened was for Sporting Kansas City to bring in a boatload of money for Iko Para in his move to Minnesota, and Iko Para gets the contract that he's looking for. And oh, by the way, with Ozzy Alonso and Iko Para and Jan Gregush, all of a sudden you have a spine defensively of your team for Minnesota United that led to all the success they had last season. So I would say Aha's a short-term replacement right now, but hopefully Ike, once this tournament is over, he's back, he's healthy, and he's back in the starting 11 for Adrian Heath.
I have to fix what I said. It was RSL is the only team in that group without 6 points. Let's talk a little bit about Peter Vermees's Sporting Kansas City. I feel like ever since I've worked in MLS, you associate Peter Vermees defensively sound. But this was a team last year that bled goals, 67 goals, second in MLS, just behind Cincinnati. What are you doing right now if you're Peter Vermees?
Well, you've already made some moves. Punchis comes in. Barath, the announcement yesterday that he's been sold back to Hungary. I think what we got from Barath was less than what we expected. Okay. And another byproduct in the conversation of Iko Para being traded to Minnesota and not having that lockdown center back partnership alongside Matt Beasler. Now, as you said, Peter and that kind of 4-3-3, whether it's inverted up or inverted down, the triangle in the middle, you always knew that it was going to be difficult. And maybe it was the CONCACAF Champions League conversation. We had seen it the year before with Toronto FC, where you start early after a short recovery time, short preseason, and things just aren't going right. For me with Sporting Kansas City last year, the talent's there. It was kind of these little mental mistakes where all of a sudden, as the league continues to evolve and get better, Sporting Kansas City was getting punished in ways that we had never seen them getting punished. Yes, they're getting a little bit older, but still the pieces within the sum is very, very strong. I think bigger picture this year, the focus has been on Alan Pulido, and we'll talk about the Mexican international and what he means to this group, but this partnership across the back line in front of Tim Melia, it's got to be much, much better than it was last season, and we saw some really encouraging signs in the first 2 games of 2020.
Let's move over to RSL taking on Colorado, Rocky Mountain Cup in Orlando. It's going to be hot. It's going to be different. That is tonight at 10:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. And Dunny, obviously, this is a team that you know well for a number of reasons with RSL. We'll get to them in a minute, but I also want to talk about Robin Fraser and how they have become competitors right away. This is a young team. Maybe not with a ton of big names or anything like that, but they found a way to play cohesively under Robin Fraser.
Which is wild because the previous coach had said basically that they quit on him and it was a bottom team and the bottom spending type of conference. Listen, Robin's been nothing short of incredible. And make no mistake about it, when you go back through Robin Fraser's coaching career, everybody gets a pass who was involved with Chivas USA. I mean, everybody gets a pass.
His
but
coaching tree
his
is
time...
impressive.
I mean, think about Jason Kreis and the run that Real Salt Lake had back in the day. He was with Mike Pecky and the New York Red Bulls with Thierry Henry during that time, where the consistency in the supporter shield was in the cupboard for the New York Red Bulls. Then he goes up and he's with Greg Vanney in Toronto FC. He finally gets his opportunity. He goes back home to Colorado, where he spent an incredible amount of time off the field, and he's getting the best out of this group. Now, his management style, his human being nature, the touch of aggressiveness when he needs it, and taking over a roster that had talent but still needed a lot of help. You get rid of Tommy Smith because you had to get rid of Tommy Smith. You bring in Drew Moore, tried, true, tested, bring him back from Toronto. And then you add a guy like Nomley to the attacking phase. Galvan's going to be added to this group of players. You have a proven goal scorer like Kai Kamara. This team has gotten significantly better than when Robin Fraser took over. And the fact, again, that they won both of their first 2 games of the season before the shutdown is a positive indicator. So they've gotten much better in what is already an extremely crowded Western Conference.
As for RSL, now the only team in Group D to not have 6 points to start the season, but so many people you talk to, they're like, what, 4 months ago? That goes out the window. But, Dunny, in talking to you, you say that this is a team that has the depth, though, to make up for it.
Biggest issue is going to be still who replaces Nick Raimondo long-term right now, Zach McMath versus David Ochoa. Health was the big concern heading in the season. Team was decimated because of injuries. But now, when I look at this roster, and I look at, as we were talking about Chris Armas, the 5 substitutions, there are more options for Freddie Wars to change the game at his disposal. All he's got to do is look down the bench and know he's got fresh legs and impact players, both offensively and defensively.
Really looking forward to that. 7 clean sheets since he took over at the helm of Real Salt Lake. All right, let's take a look at the schedule for later today. And again, we will keep you posted on the reschedule on across MLS channels of that DC United Toronto FC match. But as for tonight, we're sticking to it. Sporting Kansas City taking on Minnesota in a doubleheader, and then RSL and Colorado. Dunny, this was fun. Can't wait to do it again next weekend. Thanks for joining us. And as
absolutely.
for tomorrow,
So much fun.
As for tomorrow, Susanna Collins and Kaylin Carr have you covered. Thanks so much for joining us here on MLS Today, presented by AT&T. I'm Jillian Sakovitz, and have a great rest of your Sunday.